Alrighty, in this video we're going to go ahead and start putting together our awesome front end for our awesome blog that does awesome things.
That's awesome.
It is. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this not so awesome background.
It's a lemon.
Yeah, yeah, indeed it is. I do that by going to Content, Styles, Site, and I just remove that awful thing. And now my retinas feel so much better.
Ooh, that is nicer.
Indeed it is. Let's just leave it at that. Here's our front end. Goodbye, guys.
Thanks, great video series.
Alrighty, so what I'm going to do is I need to jump into my posts controller. I need to create the view model for my post controller that will return a paginated list of posts. Sound easy enough?
Certainly does.
It sounds easy because actually we've already done it. Like seriously, like we already have the code for this in the other post controller. So really, we're just going to be rewriting code that we already know. But I am going to go ahead and create the view model right now. We actually do have a view models namespace, and I'm going to place a posts file in it with the value post index. Now, the only data that post index needs is a public paged data of post. Note the two namespaces that just appeared.
Yep.
And I'm going to call it posts. So now we have our view model. I'm going to jump back into my controller and write the queries that will get our data. I'm going to say var base query equals database session query, note Hibernate link, post. Then I'm going to say, well, also note simple blog.models. Then I'm also going to say where it's not deleted. Now, it's important that we don't retrieve on the front end posts that have been trashed. How do we do that? Well, you might be saying we should do something like this, right? Where t not t is deleted. Think that'll work?
Well, to the uninitiated like me, that looks like it would, but I have the feeling that you're tricking me again.
I am. It's not going to work. The reason it's not going to work is a fundamental aspect of how LINQ works with databases. LINQ does not take C# code when working in databases. Instead, it takes expressions that happen to look really close to C#. Actually, it is C# code, but it's handled differently. Basically, nHibernate is going to turn this where clause into a SQL statement. Is deleted is a property that I made up. I made it up in C# land. The SQL server doesn't know anything about this property.
And that's going to cause problems.
Yep. In fact, I know the exception that we're going to get because I've seen it so many times after working with nHibernate for 4 years. And the exception we're going to get is that this method is not supported by the database. So what do we have to do? Well, we have to actually repeat ourselves a little bit. We have to go ahead and say where deleted at is not null or is null. The reason we have to do that is because the database does understand deleted at because we've mapped it down here to a column.
That makes sense.
So instead of doing not is deleted, we're going to do where t.deleted at is null. Then we're going to say order by descending created at. And that is our base query. Next up, we have to get the total post count, which is going to essentially be base query.count.
Alrighty.
Then we need our post IDs. That's going to be base query dot skip page -1, which I don't have yet. I'll do that in a second, times posts per page dot take post per page dot select t goes in tid dot toArray. Now you'll notice we're missing a couple things. We're missing our posts per page and we're missing our page. Those are simple enough to add. I can go up here to this and say int page equals 1. And then I can create the private const int posts per page, and I'll set that to 10 just like the backend.
Perfect.
So now we have our total post count and our post IDs. Let's go ahead and get our posts. That's simply posts equals base query, or sorry, base query dot where t goes into post IDs contains t.id fetch many t tags fetch t user dot toList. And of course we have to import, or we already have imported LINQ, so we don't have to in this case.
Awesome.
You'll notice this looks exactly like the backend with the exception of the deleted at equals null. Because it is.
Yeah, we just don't want to get the deleted posts.
So now all that's left to do is to instantiate our view model, which is posts index, which I'll pull in. Now you'll notice I just pulled in the wrong one. I pulled in on accident the area's admin view models, not the simple blog view models. So I'm going to back out and I'm going to click on this, and then I'm going to click on the one that I want, which is the front end view model. I don't want the back end view model. Then I'm going to say posts equals new paged data, posts, total post count, page, posts per page. Look good?
That looks awesome.
Great. So now let's go ahead and jump into our views, posts, index, and pretty much nuke out all of this except for our view bag title. Now we want to make this a strongly typed view, so I'm going to come up here at the top and say model, simple blog, view models, posts index. It is now strongly typed.
Okie dokie.
Okay, so now we're going to go in and actually write the markup for our posts. They're not going to be styled exactly the way that we want them to be quite yet, but they will be styled enough for us to continue on and work on our layout. So I'm going to use a for each loop. I'm going to say for each var post in model.posts. I'm going to open up the article element. Then I'm going to open up an h1. The h1 is going to have an href to a url.route URL with post passing in a new post ID post slug. And then we're going to put in the post name, the post title.
Alrighty.
Then we're going to go ahead and put in a div, and we're going to use html.raw post content. Now remember, I'll show you the difference between what will happen with and without the raw content in a moment, just to solidify what that exactly means. Finally, I'm going to create a footer. Now the footer is simply going to have a UL class of pull right list unstyled tags. Inside the URL, I'm going to say for each var tag in post tags, print out li a class badge, which is again from Bootstrap, with an href2 URL route URL tag new tag ID tag slug with tag name.
That looks beautiful.
Yep. Finally, we're going to go ahead and say posted, and then we're going to say cast to int, date time, UTC now, minus post created at dot total minutes. Minutes ago. Looking good?
That's looking good.
Let's go ahead and compile, and then refresh and see what we end up with. We get a route name post cannot be found. That's because I've been including in these route URLs, but I haven't actually defined the routes yet. So I don't need to define the actions or controllers or views, but in order to generate the URLs that we're using right here, I do have to put in the routes. So to do that, I'm going to jump up to app start route config. At the very least, this will give us a nice little roadmap of what we have to implement. Okay, so inside of this, we're going to go ahead and say routes map route. That's not how you spell map route. Post. That's going to be the name of the route. The URL of the route is going to be post/id-slug. The controller is going to be posts, and the action is going to be show. Finally, I need to make sure that I add the namespaces constraint at the end. So the line in its entirety is simply routes map route with the name of post with the URL of post id-slug with the controller of posts, the action of show, constrained to our appropriate namespaces.
All right, I like that.
Alrighty, let's go ahead and add our tags route as well, because our page won't work until we add both these routes in. So tags will be tag/id dash slug. New controller equals posts. Action equals tag. And then we need to make sure to constrain to our namespaces. Looking good?
That's looking very good.
Alrighty, I'll go ahead and hit F6, bring this over, and see what we get. We get a route named tag. Oh, I called the route tags, not tag. It should just be tag. Oops.
Spelling will get us every time.
It always will. And look at this. We now have a page of posts. So let's go ahead and implement pagination. The way pagination is going to work is we want to go ahead and do pretty much a similar thing to what we did before in our admin. I no longer need to have my route config open, so I'm going to close that. Now at the end of this, I'm going to go ahead and say ul class list unstyled. Inside of it, I'm going to have optionally two LIs. I'm going to say if model posts has previous page, then I want to say li with the class of poll left with the a tag inside of it for a link that links to URL action, null for the action name, and new page equals model.previousPage, or sorry, posts.previousPage. Then it's going to have a class of btn and btn primary, and then inside of it, it's going to have an a class glyph icon, and then glyph icon chevron. What's the one for the previous again? Is that chevron left? Yeah, that's chevron left. And then we're going to simply say older posts, or sorry, newer posts. Look good?
That looks good.
Next up, I'm going to say if model.posts.has next page, then, you know what, I'm just going to be lazy. Copy and paste this li. The only difference is we're going to be moving to the next page, and we're going to move the icon to the other side. We're going to change the icon to chevron right, and we're going to say older posts.
Pretty easy fix. Nothing wrong with copy and paste.
Yep. So what we have here is inside of our action, we say null. Why do we say null? Well, null actually means to ASP.NET MVC that we want to go to the action that we're currently on, regardless of what action we're on. We want to go back to it just with these new parameters added. Now that's going to become very useful because in a moment here, we're actually going to yank this entire thing out and put it into a partial so that we can reuse it for our tag display as well. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to hit refresh. And we should be able to go to the bottom and look at that. Older posts.
Older posts.
And newer posts. Older posts and newer posts. So how are you liking that?
I'm loving it.
Sweet. So let's go ahead and start talking about how we're going to do the partials. Now, the way I'm going to do this is I'm actually going to take all of this code in here and refactor it. I know we just wrote it, but I wanted to write it directly against my index first, and I do that typically so that I can identify things that can be abstracted and things that can't be abstracted. But I see here that pretty much the pagination and the loop can be moved into a partial. Not only that, our entire article can be moved into another partial as well and reused on the individual post display. So we can reuse a lot of this stuff if we make smart uses of partials. Let's see how that'll look. I'm going to go into the posts namespace or folder, and go to view, and I'm going to create a posts partial. The post partial is going to have nothing in it at this point except model, and the model is going to be simple blog infrastructure page data simple blog model post. Okay?
Sounds good.
Then I'm going to literally take all of this code, cut it, and paste it right into this partial.
I love that.
Yeah. The only things we have to fix, instead of saying model.posts, now we just have to say model. We don't have to say .posts because the model is now our post object.
I love that even more.
So how do we invoke this partial from our index.html? Well, it's simple. HTML partial posts model posts. We tell it the partial name, we give it the data, we refresh, and we see that it still works. The difference is now I can reuse the posts partial when I show my tag display. Now, I want to do this one more time. I want to actually abstract this into a partial so that when I show a post on the show page, I can simply reuse this display logic. So let's do that again. I'm going to go into posts, add view, underscore post. I'm going to remove everything from it. I'm going to strongly type it to simple blog model post. Then I'm going to copy and paste out of this. Right?
Yep.
Paste into here. And we see some red. That's because post needs to be changed to model. So we're simply going to do, instead of post, we're going to do model, because the model now is a post. There's a way to do this in ReSharper too, but I didn't want to have ReSharper change 1.5 million things on the screen at once. Anyway, so we now have our post partial. So now posts can simply say, for each post in model, HTML partial underscore post, post. Come back here, refresh. And how do you like that?
I love that to death.
Awesome. So now we can reuse our partials in the rest of the content that we're going to put together. Okay, so we have our post display pretty much figured out. We don't have the styles for it yet, but we'll worry about the styles here in a moment, because I want to move on to some other concerns. One of them is the way that we're going to route to a post. Do you want to see something sad?
I do. I want to see something sad. Okay, I don't really want to, but I think we need to.
Well, you saw that URL scheme that I put in here. It's going to be post / the ID of the post dash the slug of the post.
I do remember that.
This isn't actually going to quite work with ASP.NET MVC.
Oh, that is sad.
Yeah, we can hack it to work. It's not really a hack, but it's just an understanding of the way the routing engine works. This is never going to match properly, especially if ID is going to be an integer and slug is not. The reason is that ASP.NET MVC's routing engine gets really confused when we do not separate our parameters by slashes. Instead, we're separating it by a dash. So how do we do that? Well, we still want our URLs to be generated in this way. So we'll still leave this route in here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do kind of a hack. I'm going to make another route. Map route. This route, the name does not matter. So instead I'm going to call it post for real this time. The name is irrelevant because we're still using this route to generate our URL, but we're going to use this route for ASP.NET MVC to actually match our controller. Post for real this time is going to have an ID or a URL of post / ID and slug put together into a single parameter.
I see.
Then it's going to have a new controller of posts and an action of show, and it's going to have the namespace constraints.
I have a question.
Yes.
Does the fact that you capitalize slug matter at all?
No.
Okay, good.
The point is that this is just going to be a variable that's pulled out of the URL for me. And it's going to be pulled out as the entire thing. Because if we have a URL like http blog.dev /post /id of 432 - this is a slug, what we're going to do, we can't actually use the routing engine to yank out this and this for us. We have to do that manually. So instead we ask for the whole thing. And then what we're going to do is we're going to parse it out ourselves.
Okay.
So it's important that both these routes exist. This route is the one that's going to be matched by the router. This route is going to be the route that's used to generate the URLs.
Okie dokie.
Because you'll notice, though, inside of inside of post, we generate the URL by saying URL route URL post ID, slug. And we want to be able to continue to do that, despite the fact it doesn't quite work. So that's why we have to introduce the post for real this time.
Gotcha. I like that.
Okay, so jumping into our post controller, I can now create the show action. I can say public AR show. Now, show is going to take in a single parameter of ID and slug, right?
Yes, indeed.
And then it needs some way to separate them out. I'm actually going to write a helper method to do that. I'm going to say var parts equals separate ID and slug. So then I'm going to write a private tuple int string separate ID and slug string ID and slug. Now we'll notice that we can't quite use a tuple here because nHibernate has its own tuple type, and so does system. So we actually have to say system.tuple of int and string.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, so this method will simply match out an ID and a slug. Well, its name is separate ID and slug, so what do you expect it to do?
Exactly.
Right. So it's going to use a regex to do that. So I'm going to say var matches equals regex, which I'm going to have to import. This will bring in a system text regular expressions using statement. Dot match ID and slug, comma, @ symbol to get our literal syntax in so we don't have to double escape our slashes. We're going to say starting. The caret means start. It's going to match the start of the string. We're going to open up a group in parentheses. We're going to say /d plus, which means 0 to many digits. Then we're going to do a dash, but we're going to have to escape the dash with a backslash because a dash is a regex term. Then we're going to say, do another group, get 0 to many of anything as many times as, or not as many times as possible, but that's all we need right there. And then we're going to go ahead and say end.
All right, I like it.
Now we'll definitely want to make this not greedy as well, so I'm just going to add the question mark there. Okay, so that regular expression will actually parse out a digit followed by a dash followed by any text, which sounds like exactly what we want. So I'm going to say if not match.success return null, because that means we didn't match anything. The ID and slug was in an invalid format. Then I'm going to say ID equals int.parse matches results 1. This will pull out the first group out of the regular expression that was matched. Here's the first group. You'll notice that I'm using int.parse, and people who are familiar with that method knows that it will throw an exception and break our program if it can't parse the integer. But I have some good news for you. If this group happened to pass a regular expression of this type, this regular expression says 1 to many digits, right? /d plus.
Yep.
If it gets that far, if it actually matches and is successful, that means it has to, by definition, be a valid integer, meaning it's safe to use the int.parse here. Otherwise, we would have to use the int.tryparse method because sometimes people can obviously type in numbers that aren't numbers, but still.
All right, I like that.
Next up, we get our slug. Our slug is going to be matches results 2. 2 will give us the second group out of the URL, which is that right there. Then we will return tuple.create ID, slug. We have now made a nice little reusable method that I can use to separate out an ID from a slug. If it is unable to do so, it will return null, which makes it very easy to check for. If I say if parts is null, return HTTP not found. Next up, let's load up our post. I'm going to say var post var post equals database, not datetime, database, session, load, post, parts, item 1. Item 1 is the ID. If post is null or post is deleted, return HTTP not found. So if it was an invalid ID or the post has been deleted, just return HTTP not found.
Easy enough. We like that.
Then we're going to do something a little funky. We're going to say if not post.slug dot equals parts.item2. Remember, parts.item2 is the slug that we matched out, comma, string comparison dot current culture ignore case, then return redirect to route permanent post new parts.item1 parts.item2. I actually, in this case, I have to say ID equals parts.item1 and slug equals parts.item2. Now, what is going on here? Well, we're only loading the post based off of its ID. So, for example, if we have a URL like http blog.dev/post/43-myslug, right?
Right.
Let's say that post ID of 43, its slug isn't actually my slug. What do we do in that case? Well, we correct the mistake. We correct the mistake by doing a redirect to route permanent with the correct slug, which actually isn't parts.item2. It's actually post.slug. Sorry about that. Anyway, we want to redirect. If this is an invalid slug, we want to redirect them to the correct slug. So imagine that the slug of this post is test. We want to redirect them to blog.dev/post43-test.
All right.
We want to do this mainly for SEO purposes. See, Google and other search engines will knock you for having repeated content on your website. So what we do is we use a redirect to route permanent. Any of the redirect methods that have permanent at the end actually return a different HTTP status code that says that this thing has been moved to this other place forever.
Okay, gotcha.
To do this, so basically what we're doing here is some very simple SEO optimization where we ensure that there's one and only one way to get to a post, and that is having an ID and the correct slug, even if they came in with an incorrect slug.
All right.
Okay, the final thing we have to do is we have to return a view with a proper view model. Now, we haven't created the posts show view model yet, so let's do that. I'm going to open up view models, go to posts, and I'm going to say public class posts show, which is going to have a public post. Right?
Right.
Then I'm going to come back here and I'm going to say return view new posts show, and I'm going to set post to post.
I like it.
Awesome. The last step to implementing the show is to go ahead and create the view. Now, the view is going to be really simple. So we're going to go ahead and right-click on posts, hit add view, and I'm going to create a view called show. I'm going to keep the title in. The title I'm actually going to set to is going to be model, which I don't have yet. See how there's nothing in model except for the basic object stuff?
Yep.
I need to go ahead and make this a strongly typed view by saying model simple blog view models posts show. Now I can say title equals model post title, which will set the title correctly.
That's wonderful.
It is wonderful. There's one last thing I have to do, and that's actually, well, showing the post. Guess how easy that is?
Really, really easy.
Right, because I've already made a partial that does that for me. I can say post, model, post. Let's go ahead and build and see what happens. And come back here and refresh. Click on a post title, and I am now looking at a post.
That is awesome.
Okay, so there's another thing that I want to do in this video, and that's implementing the tags. Don't worry, it's not actually as scary as it sounds because we've actually written most of the code anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here to my post controller, my route config, and I'm going to do the same thing. Because watch, if I go ahead and I click on a tag, like programming, I get a 404 because of the routing issue, right?
I'm sorry, yep.
So then I'm going to say routes, map route, tag for real this time, which is simply going to have a URL of tag / ID and slug, new controller equals posts, action equals tag, namespaces. Now I have to go in and actually implement the tag action. So I go back to my post controller. I'm going to implement it in between the show and the index, because honestly it's actually a mix between the two. Because it not only does it take in a ID and slug, but it'll also take in a page. Because remember, clicking on a tag will bring you to a page that'll show you all items in that tag.
Gotcha.
So I'm going to say public AR tag string ID and slug. Parts equals separate ID and slug, ID and slug. If parts is null, return HTTP not found. Then I'm going to say var post equals, or sorry, not post, tag equals database session load. I really want to type in post.
You really do.
I don't know why. I just typed it so many times. Okay, so we're going to say var tag equals session load tag, parts item 1. That's all good. If tag is null, then we want to return HTTP not found. Then I'm going to say if not tag dot slug equals parts item 2 current culture ignore case return redirect to route permanent tag new ID parts item 1 slug equals tag dot slug, and that's all that. Looking good?
It's looking awesome.
Then I am going to go ahead and write some code that's actually going to be very similar to the code we have up here, but slightly different in that we're going to be searching for posts that are in the tag, which is actually very easy to do. I'm going to say var total post count equals tag.posts.count. Then I'm going to say var post IDs equals tag.posts skip page minus 1 times posts per page dot take posts per page dot select t.id dot to array. I also want to say where t dot deleted at is null. Looking good?
Except for that red page. What do we do?
We forgot to add the page parameter to the tag function.
Ah, okay.
So I'm simply going to say int, whoops, I have to do this at the end because optional parameters need to come at last. I'm going to say int page equals 1.
Perfect.
Okay, so now we have our post IDs. Now let's get our posts, which is going to be database session query post order by descending be created at dot where t post IDs contains t.id fetch ff. I'm actually going to start breaking this up onto multiple lines because it's getting really long. Sorry about that, guys. Fetch many again tags fetch user dot to list. I'm also missing one more thing. I'm not ordering my my pagination request by created at. So I'm going to say tag posts order by descending. I guess I hit G this time. G doesn't often come out as lambda parameters, but sometimes it makes its way in. And now I have my posts, which I can now turn into a view model. So I can say return view new posts tag, which is a class that doesn't exist yet. I'm going to say tag equals tag and posts equals new page data of post, passing in our posts, our total count, our page, and our posts per page. We have 2 more things to do.
Alrighty.
We need to create our view model for our posts tag, which I can do simply by jumping over to the file I've been putting them in and saying public class post tag with a public tag get set and a public page data of posts get set. Now that I've created that class, you see that all those errors go away. But we still have one because we haven't created the view yet. So I just have to go up to Posts, right-click, Add View, and I can create a tag view. Okay, so how do we do the tag view? Well, the first thing is we have to make it strongly typed. So that's going to be model, simple blog, view models, posts tag. Then I'm going to set the title. The title is simply going to be model tag name. Then I'm going to go ahead and create a header because I want to show people that we're on a tag. So I'm going to say div panel or div class panel warning. It's not because it's actually warning, but just because I like the yellowish color that comes out of this class. Again, this is
okay.
This is all Bootstrap stuff. So div class panel heading. And then I'm going to say showing posts tagged with strong model tag name. Then I'm going to add in an ahref url.route URL to home with a class of poll right and the text of clear or show all. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my posts partial to render out a list of posts. And that's fairly straightforward. All I got to do is say HTML dot partial posts model dot posts. Looking good?
All right. Looking good. I have one question.
Mm-hmm.
Tagged is spelt with 2 G's. Is that going to screw us up later?
Where?
Line 9.
Oh, tagged? Okay, no. I mean, that's just
Okay.
text. It wouldn't actually mess us up, but yeah,
All right.
it's good to spell things right. Okay, we refresh after we built, and now let's click on programming. Look at that.
That's pretty sweet.
Let me show you guys an example of pagination with tags. To do that, I'm just going to go in the post controller, and I'm going to set posts per page to 5, and then I'm going to recompile. Come back here and hit refresh. So let's see if the programming tab paginates correctly. See, the cool thing about the pagination is the pagination will technically work for every single view that tries to use the posts partial. It works because the posts partial has a URL action with null, which if you recall will make it work with whatever action it was invoked with. Meaning I can click on programming. I am now in a completely different route, but I'm looking at the same partial. And when I scroll down to older posts, it still works.
Very nice.
Okay, so as far as navigation goes, as far as all of our routes and how our tags will look and how our posts will be marked up, that pretty much wraps it up. Not our front end in its entirety. We have a whole lot more stuff to do with our layout to actually make it look halfway decent. We also have to go into posts and make sure we change this pull left to pull right for our next page. Sorry about that, guys. I noticed that just like literally a second ago that the older posts was on the wrong side of the screen. It should have been all the way over here.
That is easy fix.
Yeah. Yay for Bootstrap. But what we have to do now is we have to implement our layout. But I think that's a good thing to go ahead and do in a separate video, since we have implemented quite a bit of code on our front end now. So, what do we do at the end of every video, Steve?
Oh, we got to commit.
Indeed. So I'm going to commit this. I'm going to, well, stage it, commit it, and then I'm going to say worked on front end posts controller, implemented all markup for views. We are committed.
Yes, we are. All right, guys. See you in the next video.
Awesome.